How does creating the life of your dreams in 2016 sound? Or what about helping someone else do the same?
With Christmas approaching, the Well and You range of inspirational products is all inspiring.
Choose from vision board kits, a gratitude box, a John box, coaching packages, and more. Gifts start from just $5.
To find out more, simply go to wellandyou.com. That's WELLINEUX.com and click on the Christmas catalog to help make 2016 incredible for you and the people you care about. TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood.
Today we're discussing overwhelm, what to do when you're in that deep dark hole and how you get out of it. But before we get there, we want to say that our podcast today is sponsored by Beautify Me Beauty Therapy in Bonn Beach, who, gorgeous Jetty, came to our retreat in our lunch break. And for the women that were there, every single woman there, she painted their nails. And it was just such a divine allowing and receiving, excuse me, of the divine feminine and of doing something that we wouldn't normally do, or for some women exposing a part of their body or loving a part of their body or having attention showered on a part of their body that they wouldn't normally, in inverted commas, allow in their day-to-day life, which is very freeing. And that was just a really beautiful experience that Jenny totally embraced. She's also a mother who works, she has her own salon set up at her home, and I absolutely love how she is able to integrate on an entrepreneurial perspective, how she pulls in her love of community and women, and is so easy to talk to and bond with, together with being a mum, right?
And she was really blowing that, wasn't she? You know, around how much she's excuse me.
Do you have a charge around?
I don't know. It's a bit funny, isn't it? How much she's been able to fit kind of her business within motherhood, you know,
exactly.
and not.
It's inspiring, isn't it?
It's
inspiring.
It's a constant quest.
It's a constant quest, but it's also about when you have that moment when you recognise, like for her and for myself, I know our top value is family. So how do you create your wealth and your life in valuing that top value?
Yeah, that's in a way that's not, you know, perceiving to take away from that value.
Exactly, which she did beautifully. So highly recommend if you're in the area to check out Beautify Me Beauty Therapy in Bonn Beach. So on to today, Bridget, overwhelm. Okay, we just need to get in the zone for this because I'm feeling a bit flighty and giggly, but that comes off the back of having a really shit day.
Which is quite timely really to be discussing this topic.
It really is. And can I tell you, for all of the episodes and all of the lip service, it's not just lip service that I give here going, own your shit and delve into it and don't numb and obsess and disconnect. I'm sitting here with Bridget having a cocktail spiked green smoothie. And I'm feeling great right now compared to how I was feeling an hour ago.
So if we're laughing a bit more than usual, you know why.
So let's just break this down a little bit because I feel like there's so much in this concept of overwhelm. And I so deeply get, and I'm that person who lives the life trying to peel back the layers and get as authentic and real and vibed in my life and of my life as I possibly can. But there are days and sometimes there are weeks when it just feels too big and I want someone else to do that job because I don't feel that I can do it anymore.
What, the job of peeling back the layers or the job of like living your life?
Oh, just of everything. Living my life. Someone else can actually parent my kids because today it's just
reality is, you know, you can't, it's not like we're going to go live in an ashram or live on a hill somewhere and constantly, you know, introspect. You know, we're doing this work alongside trying to be mothers, trying to grow businesses, trying to do all that kind of stuff. And the reality is shit just hits the fan.
Yeah, it does.
And how do we claw back that sense of control when we are just pulling our hair out?
Yes, and overwhelm for me means being reactionary too. So instead of feeling like I'm, I don't know, poised and
measured and mindful.
Yes, in how I'm perceiving and in how I'm relating to my life, its situations and the people within it. I just kind of feel like I'm swinging from one emotion to the next, almost like a yo-yo, almost incapable of controlling my feelings in a way. And I feel run by them rather than feeling in tune with them.
Yeah.
I feel like
that's totally where I'm at, and it's totally the week I've had, I think, too, you know. And you notice it with your interactions with your children, with your partner, with people around you, you know, you're a bit more snappy, you're a bit less able to be patient with them.
Yeah.
You know, that's a red flag for me, is when I'm just kind of don't even have time to pause, is when I'm really thinking, I'm trying to chuck way too much stuff in my day right now. Or I'm kind of, you know, really setting challenges for myself that are probably beyond realistic, you know, to get done. You know, and just not even thinking, not kind of chunking it down, you know, not getting true for what's possible. And, you know, that serves too, because what sometimes then happens is you blow a fuse and you have a cry, and you just, that feels really cathartic sometimes.
Yeah, it really does. You know, I'm all about sitting in the emotion of it and delving into it. And I think we only ever get to the point of overwhelm because we've chosen not to recognise the things that have preceded that.
Yeah.
Right? It's the volcano explosion, but there were plenty of murmurings beforehand.
Yeah, but you ignore them.
And sometimes I notice for me, either it's that, so then my first line of questioning that I'm asking myself is, what is this revealing to me? What is sitting underneath this? What am I not honouring within myself or within my life right now that I really deeply in my gut desire, but I'm not even sometimes feeling brave enough to think, let alone speak out loud as a need or a desire.
And I think the other thing, you know, that's kind of how do you deal with it, but it's also, why am I doing this to myself as well? Because I think sometimes we can tend to stack on more and more things on our to-do list, or fill our life more and more, as almost a way sometimes to not deal with something.
Well, busyness is a way of numbing, isn't it? Because the busier you are, I even grew up with that as a strategy. Like that was something my mum always said to me, well, you're feeling really emotional, you just get busy because you'll forget about it.
Wow.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Because it totally works.
Yeah.
Because the busier you are, the less downtime you have, because it's in the downtime, the quiet time, and the
feelings come up.
The feelings, the shadow erupts, right?
Yeah.
All the whisperings that you can ignore when you're busy, all of a sudden have no place to be but in your mind.
And that's often, I think, why so many people have a hard time sitting in stillness, and of course, why we're so addicted to technology, you know, and our phones.
It's an extension of
ourselves. Yeah,
absolutely.
You know, we never before have, as a generation, or never before as a people, have we ever been able to occupy every waking moment with something.
It's true.
It's quite profound, really, isn't it? And so, what does that mean for us? I mean, that's a whole other topic, but I just find that so interesting that, you know, we kind of are getting further and further distanced away from ourselves and being present and listening to our inner wisdom, because we are so consumed and so looking outward instead of being able to look inward. So I think that if we can get that sense of stillness, and I guess what is it, building that into our day, like, you know, because that's almost the point it needs to get to for a lot of us, doesn't it? Actually being intentional about the downtime.
Yeah, it is.
Scheduling the downtime.
I think until you get really intentional about being intentional, you have to actually build it into a schedule.
Yeah.
So it's like the affirmation, until it becomes part of your lingo, you have to have it in front of you as an intention to do it, right? I think it's the same thing for that time.
Otherwise you get swept up in life.
You get swept up in it. I'm now really good at it in terms of downtime and having it. But if I have feelings of overwhelm, one, it's instinctual for me. Some of my friends, actually, I was saying to Bridget earlier, that some of my friends really struggle with that, because when my life gets overwhelming and when I go through some sort of crisis or epiphany that I need to dissect in my own mind, I completely go inward and shut off the outside world. So things that distract me from that, I instantly, in a second, let go of and won't even have an urge to engage with until I'm feeling at a point of being processed enough to move my energy circle outside of myself and my family. So emails are absolutely the first thing that go. Internet, like, not that it disappears from my house, but just I almost avoid them actively. I have no desire to be near them. My phone, text messages, Facebook, Instagram, I just disappear. And that's really hard for some of my friends.
And I mean, even for me, like, that kind of, I don't even know that I could do that, which is interesting, right? Like, you know, is that too much, that I'm too much of a people pleaser, or too much, well, too much afraid of the repercussions of not
Is that where
doing
it comes
that?
from?
Well,
From fear?
I don't know. Like, I think I've also got so much shit on, and so many, like, fingers in so many pies, I can't even imagine what would happen if I did that. But then that's almost a reason to do it, right? Because, like, it's that attachment too, isn't it? It's that attachment to that needing to always be on that also becomes a mechanism for distancing yourself from the the inner voice, or in distancing yourself from the permission to be quiet and still and, you know, introspective, which is really what you're giving yourself permission to do.
Yeah, it is. Look, it serves me immensely. I'm still trying to break apart whether it is, in inverted commas, the healthiest thing to do because of the impact that it does have for my friend. Because my friendship circle are my family, right?
Yeah.
I have deep, authentic, rich connections with those women that I have in my life. So when all of a sudden I go MIA for a week, they kind of have almost a shock reaction of, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Where did you go? You know, I feel like you're pulling away from me. Not that I necessarily even break it down into that, but I can feel that's what's going on.
To flip that, though, does that not then get them to give themselves permission to perhaps even entertain the idea that they could do the same thing in some form?
Well, I never thought of it that way, but I quite like it as a flip, Bridget.
There's always a flip. There's always a flip.
But in terms of what that does for me, it does really well. So if I'm in overwhelm, instead of trying to escape it, get busier, do more, be more social, I do the exact opposite of that. I get very quiet, I stay home, and I keep it really small. And what I mean by small is my intentions for my days become very small. So instead of being, my to-do list is, you know, 50 things and all these business stuff and internet and that I have to do, it becomes, what am I cooking for lunch that's really nourishing? What am I having as my after-school snack that's really nourishing for my kids? What am I doing for dinner? What are the stories I'm reading for bed? And it becomes that slow that it allows me the time, even though I'm still home with a 2-year-old, so even though I'm still
you're still doing
busy and doing
you haven't
things,
checked out of life, right? So
no, I'm still doing that stuff.
Yeah.
But it allows me almost, the background noise isn't there.
Yeah.
That I feel like all of that stuff is background noise for me. The phones, the internet, the connections, the the needing of my energy being outwards, which most of the time I'm cool with, but sometimes I need to cut those ties and pull that energy back in for nourishing me or my little family.
I really love that awareness, because I think very few people would have the awareness to be able to see the signs, to know, to pull in. Because I think, you know, probably most people would just either explode or make it about everybody else. Like, you know, going to sort of blame, like that other people are taking too much from me, or it's other people's fault. Like, I think it's quite intentional to actually bring it into, okay, clearly the things are not working for me. I'm pulling right back right now. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Although I think my mum's really good at that, actually. Like, really good at that kind of knowing when to go within and when to need nourishment. Whereas I really judge myself
it's such
for not
a
being
skill,
on.
really, isn't it?
Yeah.
We kind of talked about that in last week's episode with the Christmas. Rush, whatever it was, setting the intent for Christmas. It's the same thing, right? Is when you're getting those, I'm going to say in commas, negative reactions or feelings, is what are you underlying not observing or honouring within yourself. It's kind of the same thing, isn't it? And so sometimes that's really recognising what you need. Now, for me, that's what I need. But for you, Bridget, that might look completely different.
Yeah.
And so it's not that one is right or wrong. It's just a recognition of what my boundaries are.
And it's about forming your own toolkit, isn't it?
Isn't it? But you only know that by acknowledging and valuing your boundaries, because really healthy people are boundaried people.
Yeah. And are good at saying no. Whereas I think a lot of us...
but not no with nastiness.
No,
with love, because they recognise what serves them and what doesn't.
Yes. And I think the more that you can confidently say no, the more it almost gives permission to the people who are asking something from you to in turn also say no, like also know for them what's true and what's right. And because I think that it's so easy to become a yes person, you know, because I think we kind of get conditioned to do that, don't we?
We do get conditioned. I mean, that's what we're taught, isn't it, to serve, particularly as women. That's how we're generationally taught, isn't it, to serve our husbands, to serve our families, to serve our jobs, to serve our culture, to serve our community. And we get the scraps that are left over.
Yeah.
But in terms of what we're saying is it's a complete life flip, really, is we recognise that in order for all of those areas to work well, we have to be well. And therefore, what is it that we deeply need to be as well, most vibrant, most overflowing person that we can be, so that instantly, without needing to serve, serves.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the no serve, like, it serves us as much as a yes person does. I think, too, there's a kind of classic pattern, too, when we feel overwhelmed in that we think that some other kind of life would be better.
Yeah,
you know,
the grass is always greener.
Yeah, you know, you start to kind of build a fantasy.
I do think that sometimes. Don't you? I don't know. I can't even, like, I'm a stay-at-home mum,
Yeah.
right? And there are those days when it's been really hard and I think, shit, why don't I just work?
Yeah, why don't you just get a job?
Just get a job and then someone else can raise my kids.
Yeah.
Actually,
yeah.
that sounds harsh. I don't mean it that way. But someone else can have
Yeah.
them for the day.
Yeah.
And I don't need to do this. And I can just go work.
Or even it's that idea of, you know, if I could win Lotto and go and live on a tropical island, or, you know, all this kind of running around with kids is exhausting, all this driving and sitting in traffic is exhausting, all this kind of thinking about the future is exhausting. I just want to live off the grid in the country with no phone service and you know, and really slow my life down. And that is symptomatic, I think, of this sense of overwhelm. You know, and I think the overwhelm comes from living a life that's so outward, living a life that is so about what everybody needs from me.
It's the service.
Yeah. As opposed to, okay, what's most inspiring for me? Because when you know, when you tap into what's most inspiring to you, you want to serve, but you serve from that place where
You serve from the place of overflow.
yeah,
It's inspiration.
yeah, basically
a full cup.
it's a never-ending flow of inspiration as opposed to an exhausting kind of, you know, place of depletion. You know, when you're trying to constantly be something that other people are asking of you. So I don't know that, you know, you need to go and up your life or make any drastic changes like quitting your job or selling your house or anything like that. I think it's really about getting really clear on what is true for you. What do you really want? What is really important to you?
And I think sometimes that can be too big. You know, I really think we did this in our retreat, right? We asked the women there, once we'd done a section, to create a desires list, which was from the tiniest thing up to the most grand, lavish adventure you could possibly imagine. And the first thing that often happens is when you say, just get clear on what you want, what do you deeply want, is you draw a complete fucking blank.
But people draw a blank, right? Because no one's ever given themselves permission to actually entertain the thought that they could have something so grand. Because we're not conditioned like that.
No, we're not conditioned for intuition. So how do you ever check in? How do you ever go inwards and therefore know what you want unless you have the toolkit to do that?
Yeah, or not even conditioned for intuition, really conditioned to think that there's any life beyond, you know, the life that perhaps our parents had, or kind of the life that our close peers have, or people within our frame of reference have. You know, like there's kind of this idea that like celebrities or anybody who has any kind of great influence in the world are different people. They're different. They're not like me, which is not true. You know, but yet we kind of model what's possible based on what we know to be true around us. And so sometimes, you know, this idea of dreaming big can seem a bit indulgent, you know, like kind of what's the point? Fanciful, yeah. And it can be fanciful if you're dreaming something that's so beyond the scope of anything that you've ever thought about as something that interests you. You know, that there's kind of like, you know, you've got an A, your A, and like that's like a Z, and it's...
I still think you put it on there.
You can put it on there, but I guess, you know, you then want to step it back. Like, stuff doesn't, you know, you're going to figure out how you're going to get there as
totally.
you know, putting it on there.
But so when you're talking about what do you want in your life, it's really bringing it back very simply to what do you want in this day, in this moment? What do you want for lunch? What do you want, like we said in last week's Christmas podcast, what's your intent for today? What's the feeling you want to end up with at the end of your day, out of your day with? It's those small questions which lead to the big epiphany moments of, oh, that's what I really want. And when you get that twinge internally in your gut, or someone says something and you're going, oh, okay, but you really don't want to do it.
You know, when you hear yourself say yes, but you really want to say
no. Or I really should.
Yeah.
I really need to do that. It's when you see and hear and feel those things that they become your red flags for where are your boundaries at and what is really calling and valuing to you right now. I feel like we've totally got off topic from overwhelm though. Let's just take it back to, I mean, yes, we've got to know what we deeply want to create boundaries, but take it back to almost like the survival kit. So you've had the really shit day and you're in the depths of, this is just not working for me at all. What would you do?
Breathe. I reckon simply, and I even talk about this with my son even now, is just get some moments to breathe. Because I think that is a first step in saying to slow your body down and slow your mind down and slow that adrenaline that seems to be clawing at your throat sometimes down. And then start to look at, okay, what do I really need to do? Like, what's essential and what's not essential? right now?
Yes.
You know, what can I let go of?
What can you surrender to?
What can you surrender to? What can I delegate?
Yeah.
Who would love to do this for me?
Yes. And the thing is, who would love to help you? Because we often have this survival mechanism, particularly as mothers, that we have to do it to the point of breaking. And the truth of it is, we don't.
No.
The truth of it is, if I was willing enough to be vulnerable with those people that were in my circle, with those mums at school, and say, I'm really struggling today. Is there any chance someone could take my daughter for 2 hours? Someone would jump at that chance to help me.
Yeah. Being actually willing to receive that.
Yes.
As opposed to sort of, you know, going, oh, no, it's okay, and I don't want to put you out, or, you know, actually taking that with gratitude. And
so how do you look outside of yourself, outside of, maybe you even have already babysitting that's set up with parents or sisters or brothers or aunts or whoever, outside of them. So outside of your comfort zone, who else is there to support you? Because they are there. So how willing are you to just, I don't know, ask, to receive,
and I guess also when we say this, how does it immediately make you feel, the idea of asking for that? Because does that feel like it's a burden to that person for you to ask them that? Because then, okay, well, how is it not a burden to that person?
How does it serve them?
How does it serve them?
I love this stuff, Bridget, go.
So, you know, because we talked about this a lot with, I think I talked about, I don't know what podcast it was, but we talked about this idea of you were doing this with your daughter and you had an afternoon set up with her and your sister and you set it up so that they could do some art together. So, your sister is an amazing creative, you know, creative woman. And so that was beautiful for the two of them to do that together. So how could you flip this idea of something like this being a burden to how can it be a gift? You know, how can you make it a win-win for both of them, where they can really feel like that spending time with your child or whatever it is, spending time with you or helping you in some form is something that they're going to want to do. And again, it comes back to what's most important to them.
But even beyond that, right, even before you get to physically getting that I want to response from them, is even if it's not that, what are the gifts out of that?
Yeah.
What are the gifts out of them having another child with them for the day? What are the gifts to them out of the connection that
that's
they
about
get
and that's
from your
about
child?
asking you're asking yourself all these questions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so in terms of trying to flip that before you even get to necessarily the seduction and the win-win, is even in the situation which you're perceiving to be unbalanced.
Yeah.
Is how does that still really work in a benefit for your child as much as for...
And that's what I'm suggesting, definitely, like, you know, do this work before you even ask the question, because once you change your perception of it,
the way that it's received, and therefore...
And this is all based on the energy,
change.
right? So you've shifted your energy into it being you asking them and hoping for them to say yes, but you really feeling like, oh, they're not going to want to, as opposed to it being, you know, an offer, you know, and something that you're quite comfortable that you see of benefit to them.
Yes. So I like this. So we've got breathe, look outside of your normal comfort circle for where there is support that you're not perhaps recognising at this point in time.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you use?
I guess the third item was really to balance your perception that it's, you know, a burden perhaps to that person, you know, to really see that there's a benefit to the person that you're asking for help from, and to your child,
or to yourself. Yeah.
And I think also perhaps looking at how you can be grateful for the sense of overwhelm. Like, yes, you're feeling overwhelmed, but what are you feeling overwhelmed about? And until you can be really grateful for why you're feeling overwhelmed and what it's offering you, it's almost like you're going to, in some ways, continue the same pattern.
So how do you get grateful for the thing you're feeling overwhelmed about?
You start to ask how it's benefiting you. Start to ask how it's serving you in your highest values and serving you in the things that are most important to you. So if you're feeling really overwhelmed because you have got 10 emails to respond to and they're all people who want to do business with you, well, that's pretty humbling. That's a reason to be grateful. You know, these are people who are wanting to contact you and be, and they're feeling inspired by what you do. If you're feeling overwhelmed because you have all of these friends that want to catch up with you and you don't feel like you have time for them all, well, then that's something to be grateful for, because you have a great network of friends who want to spend time with you. You know, so
I'm feeling overwhelmed by my messy house.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because I always feel overwhelmed by that. Okay, you're feeling overwhelmed by your messy house. What's it messy with? Is it messy with children's toys? flip your perspective. Isn't it beautiful that you have children that have toys that you get to fill your space with, that show that you've got children who are growing and playing in your home that you've created to have them in?
Oh, wow.
You have clothes everywhere. You have massive piles of clothes. I did.
You have clothes everywhere.
I did, but I'm thinking about the stuff that's in my washing machine that I have to go and put out when I get home. You have clothes everywhere, and oh my God, how cute are those girls' clothes, because you have a little toddler, a little girl, which is just beautiful. Then you get to fold them with love and put them away for your little girl who's going to wake up tomorrow and put them on. Okay, there's people who will never have that.
You're making me feel gratitude. I love it.
There's so much to be grateful for in the overwhelm. And I think that the gratitude piece is a big one, because it just starts to humble us very quickly. And it starts to get, your body will shift. You'll start to feel it in your body, and you'll start to come back to a state of grace, which is really when we're able to make our most balanced decisions and move forward with far less craziness, I think. So gratitude, I think, is a really big one, and I think can get thrown around a lot. But
it really does now.
But I don't think it cannot be overestimated, the power of gratitude.
That's really gorgeous. I love how you said instantly you go back to breath, because instantly my reaction is to go to the sensual, which is fascinating.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
So instantly I bring myself back to my senses. So I grab that, actually I'm obsessed at the moment with that Infinite Love Society. Who was the perfume? Sacred Living Design. Who did those perfumes to us? These crystal perfumes.
Oh, that's stunning.
Perfumes. Oh my freaking God. I can't get enough of them. And so that's my thing at the moment, is I'm rubbing them into my palms, inhaling them, and then I'm rubbing them wherever my body is yearning, which at the moment seems to be over my heart space. So I always come back to the sensual. What's the smell? What's the sensual ritual that brings me back into pleasure in my body? What's the food or the drink that's going to have me sitting feeling nourished again? What's the music that's going to move me and match the emotion that I'm feeling? So if I'm feeling angry, I will choose music that makes me want to dance crazily and pump my heart rate up. And if I'm feeling really vulnerable, I'll choose a piece of music that wants to make me cry with love.
Yeah.
So I always match the music to how I'm feeling with the intent that it will move that emotion through my body and out of my body, rather than it sitting somewhere malfunctioning, I'm going to say. So I find that so interesting that you go to the breath, because I also love the breath, but it's not something I think of in overwhelm. I think of the sensual. And that roots me instantly back to the presence, and the overwhelm. Well, overwhelm disappears when you're in a present moment.
Yeah.
Overwhelm is an anxiety-driven thought, which is about your future.
It's future. It's a future state. It's thinking in the future. And, you'll see a lot of spiritual stuff which talks about, all there is the present, and which is absolute truth, right? But the reality is, if we only ever lived in the present, then we would never achieve anything in inverted commas, because we would never be future planning. And to grow or achieve anything, it requires a level of future pacing. It's just you don't want to live too much in that space, because, you get that feedback, don't you?
Yeah, the anxious thoughts.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also, if you've gotten to the point of overwhelm, it's only because you've had days or weeks or months preceding it where you've ignored the niggles of your pleasure.
Yeah, or you've
Why are you giggling?
I'm just thinking about you ignored your to-do list until it's got to crunch time, and then you're cramming.
Yeah, but it's more than that, isn't it? Because if you had space to do your to-do list with gracious time and awareness, it wouldn't get to the point of overwhelm, because you would feel able to move with it. And you're only able to give out as much as you're giving in, right?
Yeah.
So the question really is, where are you not putting in because you've just run your car with no oil to the point where it's crashed?
Yeah.
So it's a big red flag for me now, where I will now literally say to my husband, I've hit this point. I now need to consciously create space to just fill my pleasure cup. And so sometimes that will be the minute he walks in the door, he's on, and I've locked myself in the bathroom and I'm having a bath by candlelight or reading a book or, whatever. Or sometimes it'll be, actually our local library is divine and has these floor-to-ceiling windows the winter sun just melts into. And so you can get coffee there and food and take it into the library, and it's heaven. So I've taken to, having a chunk of time in the library, sitting in the sun, drinking and eating and reading entirely on my own, because that totally fills my pleasure cup up on so many levels. Or, catching up with a friend if I'm feeling really called to that, or going for a swim. Like, what is it that really fills your pleasure? What are the things that you love to do that have you feeling really good afterwards? And the key here is not, well, I've booked in that pedicure, so I'm going to go and have that. But you have the pedicure, but you come home and you're still feeling ruddy with your kids.
Yeah.
The difference between...
I think that's a surface thing. I think sometimes that really can't get to it.
No, the point is, when you're really filling your pleasure cup is when you're hitting that sweet spot between inspiration and gratitude, I think.
Yeah.
Is you could almost cry tears of inspiration for the vision that you have, or where you're going, or the feeling that you get from watching your greatest values come to life. So whether that's for you personally or for your children.
Yeah.
Whatever that inspiration is to you that brings you to tears is the same as what brings me to tears in gratitude for what my life is right now. It's almost the sweet spot between the two. And when you hit that spot between what feels really good and has you just feeling so grateful,
and what,
has
right your heart open, like your kind of heart opens and kind of...
You have to have that pull.
Yeah.
That desirous feeling.
Yeah.
That is going to refill that brings you back in a different space. And sometimes that's listening to a podcast, and sometimes that's catching up with friends, and sometimes that's doing a class. I've certainly done courses or classes because I've gotten to a point where I'm like, this is just bullshit and I can't find the answers around me. So I'm going to the next step that's going to give them to me, because as soon as I get that new toolkit, I'm then able to apply them in my own life.
Yeah, that's a big one. And it's knowing what that is for you.
Yes.
Isn't it? And sometimes that can be a process of learning. What is it that I need to have at my ready to feel that, and give myself permission to do that. And sometimes, and I find, sometimes hard to give myself permission to actually go right into pleasure, which is interesting. But as soon as I can see how it's going to serve my highest values, as soon as I can see how it's going to serve the things I really feel I need to get done, I do it. It's like the other night, which this has been a crazy week, and the other night, sure, I had a bunch of work that I could have done, but I was so feeling pulled towards the beach that after dinner, I said bye to my husband, bye to my son, and I took the dog for a walk down to the beach, and I went for a swim with the dog, and it was just so, so, so beautiful that taking that 20 minutes, half an hour out of my evening was just absolutely filled my cup so much. And the stream of energy that I had from that gave me so much more inspiration to do the work that I'd set myself to do. And I had a chance to fill my cup at the same time.
I love that.
So I think it's not, it doesn't have to be an either or either, because you can really just give yourself the space to do that thing, which will refill you.
And it's the way that modern entrepreneurial business, or, forging the pathway is moving, right? We look at Google and I'm sure you could list 100 other businesses that are
Uber
really,
and Facebook and all of them.
that are really flipping the way that we run business. It's not 9 to 5 sitting in your cubicle and being productive. Productive is when we're in our inspiration. And if we're stuck, you get out, you move your body, you change your space, and it's amazing when you do the thing that you love, the inspiration automatically hits
and as we know, and
twice as productive.
And as you and I always talk about, and I don't know that these companies directly recognize this, but everything's energy. So you can be productive in inverted commas even when you're not technically, physically doing the work, because you are still influencing outcomes where you are at energetically.
Yes.
And sometimes when we're, procrastinating is when we have our greatest ideas, because our brain has a chance to switch off from the active work and it has to go into processing mode in the background. And that's when some of the best ideas come up.
But this is the point of being quiet and intentional too, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is when you start to rein those things back in and you make time again for refueling your cup, is when that stuff ticks away in the background and all of a sudden you have that epiphany moment.
So you don't have to always be actively on.
No, definitely not. I would say even the opposite is just as rewarding, if not more, to be honest, because you come out the other side much more integrated.
And I think it can be easy to be, when you're feeling overwhelmed, because you'll be breathing quite shallow and you feel a bit flighty. Like whenever I've been to a kinesiologist, when I've been in that state, you know, she'll be like, oh yeah, you're over here in the corner. Like I'm, you know, like 2 meters out of my body. And that's kind of what it is, isn't it? It's like you're so sort of out of your center that it's what can I do to get myself back into my center.
And that is checking, like we just said, checking in with what you really deeply want, checking in on what those flags have been or where you're not honouring, getting into gratitude and, I don't know, grace with where it is that you're at.
And I think if you've still got blocks on it, you know, because you feel like you can't because your family needs you too much, well, how does it serve them for you to go and do this thing? How will it benefit them? Ask yourself enough times that question until you see then that there's just as many benefits to them as well as you of you going and seeking what it is that you need to refill, because it'll ripple out. We talk about this all the time, but we can't emphasize it enough.
And what are the benefits beyond just that? I really love the way that you even put it to me before, is what are the benefits of me not being around in that moment for my kids? What does that allow them to do, to make connections with, to process, to have opportunity to access, that had I been there, mother bearing them, they wouldn't have the opportunity to do?
Yeah, that's another one. Another one I think we often don't let ourselves see as mothers, because particularly if that's our highest value, we see the importance of us being there above all else.
Yes.
And we don't often want to see the gifts of us not being there for them.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can be better for them because they have to become more resilient. They sometimes get thrust into a situation that's well outside their comfort zone that can go on to create a massive void in their life, which then creates a massive inspiration for them to do things a certain way, or, you know, serve a lot of people who also may have experienced something really challenging. So, yeah, challenging your perspective on that kind of thing is really interesting.
So I think that stuff's good in the background, but if you're having one of those deep, dark days, I highly recommend a cocktail green smoothie.
I've just got to the bottom and it's really strong.
It's amazing.
It's, yeah, good.
And every now and then a little bit of numbing, I think, does actually serve.
Yeah.
You know that there's stuff playing in the background and you are intentional about what you're doing, as opposed to just unconsciously going, oh, God, just give me a drink and I just need it and I'm not going to deal with the rest of it. It's very different.
Yeah.
But sometimes
if it's an every night thing, maybe not. But if it's something, I mean, totally, you know, we're not above getting drunk.
I don't know if that's our intention here.
No, but you know, it serves sometimes, right? Like, you know, once in a while, I don't know. I had a great night the other night.
Yeah, just to be able to let loose.
Yeah.
To not be controlled in those thought patterns. But beyond that, just actually giving your body a physical way to relax, so that potentially you can meet that energy level and open up even vulnerability or perspective without there being the overflowing emotion. Maybe is even where that sits. So I really hope that in this week to come, if you are feeling moments or days of overwhelm, that you're able to recognise where you need to cut ties to your energy flow outwards and direct that back inwards. Where you perhaps didn't previously perceive gratitude, that maybe now you start to awaken and perhaps bring tears, for not tears out of guilt or judgment about your feelings about that, but just actually flipping it the way that Bridget does. And if you need any help doing this, we really would love those interactions on the Facebook page. If there's anything that you need us to open up, go deeper into, explain more, or other topics that are active in your life that you would like us to shed some light on, we would really love your input and direction on where to go with that, because mostly we just go, what's really calling to us today?
Yeah. So we'd love to know what's calling to you.
Absolutely. So you can get into contact with Bridget on suburbansandcastles.com, and your next movie night is in January.
Yes, and it's called Awake, the life of Yogananda, who was probably one of the most prolific yogis in the 20th century. And kind of, you know, the film looks at Steve Jobs and the Beatles and all these kinds of other, you know, high profile people who really kind of revered this yogi and how he influenced their lives. It's going to be quite an interesting, inspiring one in January. And to contact Jules at the moment.
Yes, still through the Facebook page of The Pleasure Nutritionist or Nourishing the Mother, but the website and blog is legitimately coming soon. Yeah.
Stay tuned.
And once again, today's podcast is brought to you by Beautify Me Beauty Therapy in Bond Beach. So if you really need a beautiful woman to connect with for all of your beauty needs, we would highly recommend her. And until next week, when we continue to peel back the layers, we hope you have a beautiful week.
Bye.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.